Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're starting Daf Hey, Daf 5, Masechta Hagiga. Friends, you can tell me what Daf Hey talks about. The Mice, it's a whole bunch of Agadatas. It's interesting stuff. Friends, should we just jump in? Good, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara on Daf Hey Amud Aleph, about maybe between 8 and 10 lines into the page, I'd say. Rabbi Yochanan, you got it? Kavamati la'aika bachi. The Rabbi Yochanan, when he would reach the following pasuk, he would cry. What did the pasuk say? It's pasuk in Eov, right? Right. It says, "Vatisiseni vo levalo chinam." That the Eibishter says that the Satan, that the Nudnik, he made him sort of punish Eov for no reason. If you have a servant that his master, they can sort of sway him, they could persuade him to do negative things, and he listens, that's bad news for the servant, right? Meaning you have Eov, and apparently the Satan was able to convince the Eibishter to do bad things to Eov. Eov is in big trouble. Rabbi Yochanan would reach the following pasuk and he would cry, that he doesn't believe in his holy ones. Well, if he doesn't believe in the holy ones, well then, who is he going to have faith in? Who is he going to believe in? So Yom Echad, have a cause of orcha. So one time, Rabbi Yochanan was traveling, and he saw a certain fellow, who was picking figs. Alright, so Rabbi Yochanan was walking somewhere. He saw a fellow. The fellow was picking pigs. Picking figs. Alright. Shavik hanach de matu v'shakil hanach de lo matu. And the fellow was doing something peculiar. He was Shavik, I'm going to read that again. Shavik hanach de matu. He was leaving those that were ripe, v'shakil hanach de lo matu. And he was chopping the ones that were not ripe, that were unripe. So, Omele lav hani mailan tvei, to which Rabbi Yochanan says to this fellow, I don't understand. Why are you leaving the ripe ones? The ripe ones, aren't they better? Omele, so the fellow responds, hani le'orcha ba'inun lehu. He says, look, I'm traveling somewhere. I need to take these with me. Hani natron, bani lo natron. And ultimately, if I'm traveling somewhere, the unripe ones are going to preserve, whereas the ripe ones are going to spoil. Omar, Hainu dichsivim b'kedoshav lo yaimin. And Rabbi Yochanan says, aha, now I understand. When the pasuk says in b'kedoshav lo yaimin, that God, I guess God doesn't believe in the holy ones, it means that if we go back to our metaphor of the figs, so the figs, the ripe ones might be very good right now, but they're going to go bad. They're going to go rotten. Whereas the unripe ones ultimately are going to work out. And therefore, what it means, Mikdoshav lo yaimin, that he doesn't believe in the holy ones, meaning the holy ones might be holy right now, but who knows what will be in the future. Okay, fine. So Ini, is this really so? But one second, there was a certain student who was in the neighborhood of Alexandria, v'shachiv ad zuter, and he died very young. And Rabbi Alexandria said, that if this young student would have been a shtickle better, so then he would have lived. But if that's the case, then what about Hey Mikdoshav Lo Yaimin? Meaning, if we just said a minute ago that the Eibishter, takes young, right? Maybe, right, that you have these holy people are going to die young because, who knows what will be in the future. So if you have a Torah student who dies young, it means that he's holy, right? Hey Mikdoshav Lo Yaimin, right? He doesn't believe in the holy ones, i.e., that the holy ones die young. So that's an indication that a fellow is holy. Just like these figs that are ripe are the ones that get left aside because ultimately they're not going to preserve. So also the holy ones are the ones that die young. And yet you have this student who died young, and Rabbi Alexandria is saying it's because he was a shtickle nudnik. So, but one second, I thought we said Dafka, the holy people are the ones that die young. So, in this particular case, this fellow, he was a shtickle nudnik. He was a shtickle nudnik l'maaseh. He was disrespectful to his teachers. So, okay, fine. So that's why Alexandri said that if he would have been a little bit better, then he could have lived longer. Alright, but okay, I guess in principle, there is this concept that the holy people may be taken early. Interesting. Rabbi Yochanan kimati la'ikra bachi. Rabbi Yochanan, when he would arrive at the following pasuk, he would cry, "V'kiravti aleichem la'mishpat, va'yisi eid memayir, va'machshefim va'menaifim, va'nishbayim la'sheker, uva'oshke sachir sachir." Period. So let's read that again. So Rabbi Yochanan, when he would reach the verse that says, "V'kiravti aleichem la'mishpat," and I will bring myself close towards you in judgment, va'yisi eid memayir. And the Eibishter says, I'm going to be a very quick witness. I'm going to be quick to testify against you. B'machshefim, against the machshefers, against the sorcerers, people who are having inappropriate relationships, and people who swear falsely, and people who don't pay workers. So we see, in this pasuk, the Eibishter is saying that he's going to be quick to testify against us. So if you have a servant whose master is coming close in judgment and testifying against him, is there any way to remedy this situation? It's a pretty shver matzav, right? You have a servant that his master is testifying against him in court. Oh, that's modna. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Elanu sheshakal aleinu hakasuv kalas kachamura. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that it's not good for us that the Eibishter compares, right? That he juxtaposes the lighter ones with the more stringent ones. Meaning, if we look at that pasuk, it says that he's going to testify against us by machshefim v'menaifim, by sorcery and adultery, and also people who swear falsely and who don't pay their workers. Meaning, sorcery and inappropriate relationships, those have a capital punishment. Right? That's pretty hardcore stuff. Whereas dinim ominous, right, needing to pay somebody, that's not exactly a death penalty over there. And yet, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says it's not a good sign for us that God is like lumping them all together and assuming that they're like kind of all in the same group, all sorts of bad things. It doesn't bode well for us. Amar Rish Lakish says, Rish Lakish kol amate dino shel ger kilumate dino shel maila. A fellow who sort of is dishonest with the judgment of a convert. So it's as if he's being dishonest and improper with judging God. Shenemar umate ger umati ksiv. That it says umate ger, those who sort of tilt the judgment of a convert. But mate is also, it could be read umati. It's like you are like tilting and distorting my judgment. So that's a problem. Amr B'chanina by Papa. Okay, let's see what does he say. Says B'chanina by Papa, so a fellow does nudnik one day. He does something is shver, and but he feels bad about it. He feels bad about it. Lo miyad, so we immediately forgive him. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, v'lo yireuni, that they don't fear me. Ha yireuni mochin lo miyad. That in that pasuk, that same pasuk, right, that says, right, we've been reading this, we've been expounding this pasuk for the last few lines. We're going to back up like 10 lines, right? It says in the pasuk, "V'kiravti aleichem lamishpat va'isi eid memai b'machshefim v'menaifim v'nishbayim l'shekav v'oshkis chai sochir," and then it continues umate ger, and then it continues v'lo yireuni, and they don't fear me. Ha yireuni, but if they do fear me, mochad lo miyad. So then we forgive them immediately. Wow. All right. right? If you feel bad about it, you have regret, remorse, so I forgive you immediately. Rabbi Yochanan, when he would arrive at the following pasuk, he would pasha cry, Ki has kol ma'aseh Elokim yavi b'mishpat al kol ne'elam. That all of the actions of God, right, He's going to bring, I guess, as kol ma'aseh, no, I guess it refers to people, right? That the people are going to come to judgment al kol ne'elam, even on the hidden things. And Rabbi Yochanan, he would cry and he would say, Eved shirabu shokel o shigagos kizdonis, a servant whose master is equating mistakes with things that are brazen, with things that are on purpose. Takona yeshlo, does he have any, does he have any hope? I mean, it's pretty schwer, that the mistakes are going to be considered like the deliberate things. It's not a good matzav. Maya konelam, what does it mean on even the hidden things? Rav says, Rav ze'ahori kino b'fnei chavero v'nimazbo. Interesting. So this means that you have a fellow who kills a louse, right? Reuven kills a louse in front of Shimon, and it disgusts Shimon. Shimon gets disgusted by it. So that's something that you shouldn't do. Shmuel says, Shmuel ze harok b'fnei chavero v'nimazbo. If Reuven spits in front of Shimon and it kind of grosses Shimon out, so that's not a good thing. My im tov imra, and what does it mean if good, if bad? Right, meaning we're equating something that's both good and bad at the same time. This is a fellow who gives charity to a poor person in public. So it's good and bad, right? It's good because he's giving charity, but it's bad because maybe embarrassing. It's like one time Rabbi Yanai saw a certain fellow that he gave money to a poor person in public. And Rabbi Yanai said to the giver, to the fellow who's giving charity, Mutav deloya avasle. It would be better if you didn't give him the charity. Mehashta, better than what you have now, which is to Yavasle v'chsafte, that you gave charity to this fellow and you embarrassed him in public. To Reb Shila, they say by the Besmedrish Reb Shila, Zanos in Stokalisha Baseser, that again, another example of something that's both good and bad at the same time is a man who gives charity to a woman, but in hiddenness, in a place where they would be alone together. To that all of a sudden you can create a situation where people might think that she's having an inappropriate relationship. So therefore, it's not a good, so if a person gives, a man gives money to a woman so he's giving tzedakah, so that's a good thing, but he's giving it in private in a way that, people might ask questions about what they're doing, and people could suspect that maybe she was having an inappropriate relationship, so there's sort of a not so good side to that coin. Rav Amar says Rav, another example of something that's both good and bad at the same time is a fellow who sends to his wife meat that hasn't been properly sort of prepared, and he does this on Friday when she's very, very busy, right? So like maybe the sinews and things that need to be removed haven't yet been removed, and she's very busy, she's taking care of things, and she might end up kind of not realizing that the meat had, there was still some work to do. So that's another example of something that's both good and bad at the same time. Sending meat, but also you didn't prepare it properly, so then it might not get prepared properly. Rava mishager. But one second, in fact, the Gemara, Rava just said that you shouldn't send meat that hasn't been properly, processed, I guess, prepared. You shouldn't send that to your wife on Friday because she's really busy, but Rava would do that. So why is he saying not to if he himself would do it? Shani bas Rav Chizda de Kimle begava de bekia. Well, Rava, of course, was married to the daughter of Rav Chizda, and Rava knew that that his wife, the daughter of Rav Chizda, wouldn't have any issues sort of with whatever needed to be done with the meat, and there wasn't any concern in that case. Rabbi Yochanan, when he would reach the following pasuk, he would cry, also rose rabos v'tzaros, that it's going to be when these like bad things that are particularly bad, and many of them, So these things are going to come upon the Jewish people. If you have a servant, a slave, that his master is coming up with all sorts of negative predicaments for him, Takoni Yeshlo, is there any way to fix this situation? It's a pretty shver matzah. If you have a servant that the master is coming up with, right? Also rose, rabos, vitzaros, all sorts of very, very bad things. So then the servant is in big trouble. My rose, vitzaros, what are these things that are both bad and, I guess, like, I don't know, painful and plaguing? Where am I? So my rose vitzaros. So Amr Rav says, Rav, rose shenaisos saros zo lazo. It's these bad things that when you put them together, so that it becomes like even worse. For example, zibura va'akrava. Like the bite of a bee together with the bite of a scorpion, because when it comes to, what is it? One of them, the remedy is with cold water. The other one, the remedy is with hot water. And right, so if you get stung by both a bee and a scorpion, so what do? Do you use the hot water or the cold water? And to make things worse, so then, the one that needs the cold water, if you do the hot water, it's bad. The one that needs the hot water, if you do the cold water, it's bad. So you're basically stuck, right? So that's rose, rabos, vitzaros, right? That's these really bad kind of situations, because you have rose, shenaisos. Where am I? So rose, shenaisos, saros, zolazo, right? So these sort of bad things that sort of become compounded and even worse when they're together. Kigon, for example, zibura, I'm reading that again, a bee sting, ve'akrava, in the bite of a scorpion, because sort of the remedies end up causing problems for the other kind of bite. Shmuel says, Shmuel, going back to the question of Imtov ve'imra, we said something that's both good and bad at the same time. So that somebody who gives money to a poor person, b'shas dochko, at the time that already he's in a shver matzav, really you should already give him money before that. So if a person gives money to a poor person when already he's sort of in a shver matzav, in not such a good situation, so then it's good, you're giving money, but it's also bad because it's already not a good situation. Amar Rava says, Rava hainu da'amr inshe, this is what people say, Zuzah la'alala lo shchicha l'slisa shchiach. That money is never available to sort of like buy produce, right? Meaning a person right now needs to buy produce, and nobody's necessarily giving him money, but then you wait until things really get bad, right? And he doesn't have anything, so all of a sudden now people are willing to give him money. But really when he needed money was before then. The pasuk says, V'chara api bo bayomahu vazavtim, right? And it says, Parshas Hazinu, it says, I believe it's Hazinu, so that the Eibusha says he's going to get upset on that day, vazavtim v'starti ponei meim, and I'm going to abandon the Yidden, and I'm going to conceal my face from them on that day. Omar Rav Bardla Bar Tavyomi Omar Rav Kol she'enu behester ponim enu meim. If you have a fellow who's not behester ponim, all is good, he doesn't have any concealment of the face of God, right? God doesn't conceal his face from that fellow. Enu meim, he's not a real Yid. Kol she'enu bivahoya lechol enu meim. A person who has never experienced that he'll be eaten by his enemies, enu meim, is not a real Yid. Amrulay Rabbanon the Ravid, the rabbi said to Ravid, Mar lo be'ester ponim, Isay, lo b'v'hoya lechol, Isay. The rabbis looked at Ravid, they said, Ravid, as we learned at the end of Masechta Morikain, Ravid was a wealthy man. He got the wealth of Rav Chizda. So they looked at Ravid, they said, hey, you're not being eaten by your enemies. You don't seem to have God concealing his face from you. So Omer Lu, he said to them, Yadisu kama mishadarno betzina beishvar malka. He said, what do you know? Do you know how much money I have to send all the time to Shvor Malka that'll leave me alone? But nonetheless, it was too late. The rabbis were already like, what's the deal with Rava? He seems to have everything. And in the end, the king Shapur, he sent into Rava's house and they robbed him. It was shver. Omar, and he said, Hainu detani, this is what we learn in the Brisa. Omar B'Shim ben Gamliel says, B'Shim ben Gamliel kol makom shenosnu chachom beineim omiso oni. That wherever the rabbis place their eyes, if they already kind of, put their sights on you to say, hey, what's going on with you? So then it's either going to be death or poverty. And we see that when the rabbis were like, what's to do with Rava? So then he got robbed. Says the pasuk, Vanochi haser astir poni bayomahu, and I will surely conceal my face on that day. Omar, Rava says, Rava, Omar Kadosh Baruch Hu says the Eibishter, Avapisha estarti poni meim bachol madaber, that even though I've concealed my face from them, I will still interact with them and speak with them in a dream. Because it says, right, Vanochi haser astir poni bayomahu, on that day. But at night, when you're dreaming, the Eibishter could come to you. Rav Yosef, Omar says, Rav Yosef, Yodenu tuya aleinu, that the Eibishter's hand is nonetheless stretched out upon us. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Uvitzel yoda yodi chisisicha, that I cover you in the shadow of my hand. Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya. Okay, so now we talk about a story with Rabbi Yoshua. Havakoi be Keser, and he was by the Caesar. So Rabbi Yoshua was by the Caesar. Achvilahu mina, and there was a nudnik. There was a nudnik at the Caesar, a heretic, and he sort of made a gesture indicating Ama de adrinu mari la'ape mine. So this heretic sort of made a gesture towards Rabbi Yoshua as if to say that the Yidden are a nation that their master, that God, turned his face away from them. Achvele. So in response, Rabbi Yoshua sort of made a gesture to this heretic. Yodenu tuya aleinu. No, God's arm is outstretched upon us in a good way. Omer lekesel Yoshua my achvelach. So the Caesar noticed that there was this whole sign situation going on between Rabbi Yoshua and the heretic, and the Caesar says to Rabbi Yoshua, "My achvelach, what did this heretic signal to you?" So Rabbi Yoshua says what he signaled was Amade ahadrinu mari la'ape mine. Rabbi Yoshua says he was saying that the Yidden are a nation that the Eibishter has turned away from us, turned his face away from us. And I pointed out to him, that in fact, God's hand is outstretched over us to protect us. And then they said to that heretic, what did you signal towards Rabbi Yoshua? Right? So they said, well, we signaled to Rabbi Yoshua that the Yidden, that the Jews are a nation, that their master has turned away from them. And what did Rabbi Yoshua point out to you, gesture to you in response? Lo yadaina. And the heretic says, I don't know what he pointed out to me in response. Omru, they said, Gavard lo yada, my machvele b'machog, that this heretic, this fellow who doesn't know how to understand what is being pointed to him, Yahweh Kame Malka, should do that very thing in front of the king. Right? They said, clearly you don't really know what you're doing with these signals, with these signs, with these gestures, and you think that it's appropriate to do this in front of the king, in front of the Caesar. So what do you think they did? Afku v'katlu, they pashit, executed the fellow. They pashit executed the fellow. They said, why are you making signs and gestures in front of the king if you don't even, you're not even an expert, you're an amateur gesturer. So they said, you were inappropriate, therefore we're going to kill you. When Rabbi Yoshua was dying, they said, so the rabbi said to Rabbi Yoshua, what are we going to do about the heretics? Because Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya apparently was very active and very successful and effective in combating the heretics. So they said to Rabbi Yoshua, what are we going to, once you're gone, what are we going to do about combating the heretics? So Rabbi Yoshua says to them, of the Eitzim Ibanim Nisrucha Chochmasum, that when the advice it gets lost from the children, so then also their wisdom becomes spoiled. What does that mean? That when advice is left from, removed from the children, then the wisdom of the nations of the world becomes rancid. Meaning, they were concerned that when Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananiah dies, so then who's going to stick up for them? Who's going to defend them against the heretics? And he responded to them, well, basically, even if I'm gone, and you're concerned that you'll be less effective in your arguments, but nonetheless, don't worry, because their arguments are also going to go downhill, right? Of the eitzim ibanim nisrcha chochmasim, I'm reading that again, of the eitzim ibanim nisrcha chochmasim shalumas ha'olam. When the children sort of don't have proper advice, well, also the wisdom of the other nations also kind of goes down in quality. Vibai Sema, if you want from here, Vibai Sema, if you want, I'll prove it from here. Bayomer Nisav and Elecha ve'elcha lenegdecha. Esav says to Yaakov Avinu, let's go and I will walk besides you, i.e., that the Yidden and the Goyim and the Gentiles will be sort of on the same level. Rabbi Ila Habasolik B'darga Devei Rabbi Bashila. So Rav Ila was going up the stairs by the Besmedrash of Rabbi Bashila. Shamua liyinuka. And you heard a little boy, Davakakari, that he was reading the following pasuk, Kihine yotzaharim v'ruach umagid lo'adam maseicho. That you have the one who creates the mountains and winds, and he tells a fellow what his speech is. Omar, and Rabbi Ila said, if you have a servant that his master even tells him like what his speech is, what he's talking about, everything that he's said, this servant is in big trouble. What does it mean, everything that he said? So Omer Rav says, that even the interactions and the speech between a man and a woman when they are together in bed, so even that is told back to a person when he passes away. Ini, is that really so? V'Rav Kaina have a gani to say puri derab. But 1 second, is it really true that we play back to a person at the time that he dies, even the talk that he had with his wife? But 1 second, one time we learned there's a Gemara in Brachos. We learned in Gemara in Brachos that one time Rav Kahane, he snuck onto the bed of his Rebbe Rav. V'shami d'soch v'tzochak v'asa tzochav. And Rav Kahane heard that Rav was sort of, joking around with his wife, and then they slept together. Omar damipume d'Rav k'manzlotoyim le'tavshila. And Rav Kahane says to Rav, he says, Rav, it sounds like you're very hungry. It sounds like it's the way what it sounds like with you and your wife is as if it's your first time being together. That's how excited you were. So I'm like, Kahana poke. So Rav says to Rav Kahana, he says, Rav Kahana, get out of here. Lava Rechara. It's not respectful. It's not nice to hide under my bed when I'm here with my wife. So what do we see? So on the one hand, we're saying that even that when a person dies, we even tell him the discussion that he had with his wife. But on the other hand, we see that Rav, was sort of joking around with his wife. So clearly, it's not such a bad thing. So lokash, it's no problem. It depends if he needs to appease his wife or not. If he has to appease her, so he appeases her. If he doesn't have to appease her, then he should be, he shouldn't just be speaking and talking nonsense for no reason. All right. That if you don't, right, it says the pasuk that God says that if you don't listen, so my soul will cry in the hidden places because of its exaltedness. What does this mean? That the Eibishter has a place, and this place is called Mistarim. That's what it's called. What do you want me to tell you? My Mipnei Geva, And what does it mean that his soul is going to cry because of the exaltedness? Amr Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak mipnei gaivasan shel Yisrael, because of the exaltedness of the Yidden, shenit lameim, that it was taken away from them. The Eibishter cries over that. V'nas love the kuchavim, it was given to the Gentiles. Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar says, Shmuel bar Nachmani mipnei gaivasa shel malchus shamayim, that God cries about the exaltedness of the kingship of the heaven, of God's kingship that has basically fallen down since like the Beis Hamikdash and stuff. Now the Gemara wants to know, wait, does God really cry? Papa says, Papa, there's no sadness before God. The Apostle says, that there's like, splendor and majesty and strength and happiness. Those are the things that are before God, not crying. So Lakash, it's no problem. So it depends if we're talking about in the inner places or if we're talking about in the outer places. Bebati baroi, 1 second, period. So in the inner places, so then God can cry, but in the outer places, so God doesn't cry, right? It's like the pasuk that said, right, b'mistarim, in the hidden places, right, that God can that God cries sort of in the hidden places, but in the external places He doesn't cry. All right, what He doesn't cry in the outer sort of places. Vayikra Adonai Hashem Tzvakos, that God will call out on that day, for crying and for mourning and for balding of the head and for wearing sackcloth. To which the Gemara says, well, that's in the context when it says that God is crying over there. So that is, right, and it says, Vayikra Hashem Tzvakos, right? God's going to call out. So it sounds like it's in an outer place, and it's saying that He's crying there. So it says, yeah, but that was in the context of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, that when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, even angels of peace cried. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Hen er olam, that their altar was destroyed. Tzaku chutza malachi shalom ayuvkayun, that these angels of peace cried out bitterly. All right. Says the pasuk. Where's this pasuk? It's a pasuk in Yirmiyah. Udma sidma v'sered eini dima. That like my eye is going to cry tears kinishba eder Hashem, because the flock of God has been taken into captivity. Amar Belaza says, Shalosh demo salalu lama. How come the pasuk says tears 3 times? Right? Udma. Well, am I reading that right? Wait, where is this pasuk? Pasuk Vav. What does it say? V'damoa tidma v'sered eini dima ki nishba eder Hashem. So why does it say v'damoa tidma v'sered eini dima? It says v'samoa tidma and it says dima. Why is it saying like, right, they all mean tears? Why does it say that tears 3 times? Ki nishba eder Hashem, because the flock of God has been taken into captivity. Amar Belazu shalosh demo salalu lama. How come there are 3 tears here? Achas hamikdash rishon, achas hamikdash sheni. 1 for the first temple, 1 for the second temple. V'achas al Yisrael shagalu bimkomon. And a third tier for the Yidden that have been exiled from their place. Vikad amar, those who say achas al bitul teireh. Those who say that one of the 3 tiers is for bitul Torah, for the nullifying of Torah. Bishlam al-man Amar Yisrael shagalu. I understand if you say that one of the tiers is for the Yidden that were exiled. That's why the pasuk says, well, because the flock of God was taken into captivity. So it makes sense that, right, that God cries for the Yidden who were exiled. But if you say that one of the tiers is for that Torah is being nullified, so then how does that shtim? How does that jive with that the flock of God has been taken into captivity? So the Gemara says, well, those are basically go hand in hand, right? That the exile goes hand in hand with the inability to study Torah. That when people are exiled, so Memele, right, they're being exiled out of Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael is, right? Avir the Eretz Yisrael Machkim. Eretz Yisrael is where the Torah is at. So Memele, if the Yidden are being exiled from Eretz Yisrael, so there's going to be Bittul Torah. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Shlosha Kadosh Baruch Hu Baruch Alein, there are 3 individuals that God cries for them. B'chol Yom, every single day. And here are the 3 people. Al She'ef Shel Azuk B'Torah Ve'eno Osek, somebody who has the opportunity, somebody who has the ability to study Torah and he does not. Val She'ef Shel Azuk B'Torah Ve'osek, and somebody who's unable to study Torah and he does. Interesting what exactly that means. As well as a corrupt politician, right? A person who's sort of in a position of authority in the community, in the congregation, and he abuses his power. Rebbe Havanokit Sefer Kinos. One time, Rebbe was holding a book of Eicha, the book of Lamentations, V'Kakari Begave, and he was reading from Eicha Kimata Lai Psuka when he arrived at the following pasuk, Hishlich Mishamayim Eretz, that he threw down, that he sent from heaven to earth, Nafal Min Yadei, the book fell from his own hands. Omar Megar Ram Levera Amikta, says, wow, right, from like the top of a roof to a deep pit. Kilu, he's reflecting on sort of how the honor of God fell from heaven to earth, crashing down to earth, and also that was kind of represented by this book, by the book of Eicha that fell out of his hands. Rebbe Reb Chia Avu Shakli v'Azli b'Orcha. One time, Rebbe and his student Reb Chia were traveling. Kimatu lau mata, and then they arrived at a certain city, at a certain place. Amri, they said, Ika tzub mirabbananacha. So they said, well, if there's a Talmud Chacham over here, Nezel v'Nekabel Ape. So they figured, well, if in this place there's a Talmud Chacham, well, let's go and visit the Talmud Chacham. Amri, they said, they said, yes, there's a Talmud Chacham here, and he's blind. Amri Reb Chia Rebbe. So now Reb Chia says to Rebbe, look, Tiv'at lo tezalzu b'nesiuscha. Reb Chia says to Rebbe, says, look, Rebbe, you're the Nasi. It doesn't sound so reassuring. We asked if there's a Talmud Chacham. They say, yeah, there's one Talmud Chacham, but he's blind. Reb Chia says, I don't know. You don't have to go, Rebbe. I'll check it out. Right? Ezel ana, I'll go v'akbil ape, and I will greet this Talmud Chacham. Takpe v'azol ba'adei. But nonetheless, Rebbe insisted that he go with Reb Chia. Kavu mipatre mine. When it was time to leave from this Talmud Chacham, Amrlu, he said to them, Atem ikbaltem panim hanirim ve'eno nirim. Rowan, that you too, that Rebbe and Reb Chia, you came to greet a face that is seen but is unable to see because he's blind. Tizkul akbil panim aroim ve'eno nirin. May you merit to see the face of God, the face that sees but is not seen. Omarle, at which point Rebbe says to Reb Chia, he says, Iku ashto menaiton me'ai birchasa. Right, and says Rebbe to Reb Chia, look, you wanted me not to come, but look what we would have missed out on. That was such a geschmack blessing. Omru le miman shmia lach. So they said to this Talmud Chacham, who is your Rebbe? So mi pirkei Reb Yaakov shmia li. Right, so they said to this Talmud Chacham, from where did you learn that? That greeting a Talmud Chacham is a great thing. Mi pirkei Reb Yaakov shmia li. So he says, I heard it from the lectures of Reb Yaakov. Reb Yaakov ish kvar chitaya have a makbil ape the Rebbe kol yoma. That Reb Yaakov from Kvar Chitaya Abamakbil Ape de Rabbi Koyoma, he would greet his Rebbe every single day, Kikosh, and when Reb Yaakov got old, Omerle, so the teacher said to him, Lo nitztar mar, de lo yochil mar. He says, look, don't schlep out here to see me every single day. Omerle, to which Reb Yaakov says, Mizutamai dechsiv bu b'rabanan. Reb Yaakov says, what do you mean? Why would I stop coming? Is it a small thing, that which you said about the rabbis? V'chi od lo netzach, lo yira ashachas, kir chacham yomusu. that the way it's understood here is that V'chiod lanetzach, he will live forever. Lo yira hashachas, he won't see, sort of destruction. Ki yira chacham yamusu, that he will see the chachamim, dead wise people. The drush is u'ma'aror chacham b'misasan yechef. We're saying that the Pasuk says v'chiod lanetzach lo yira hashachas ki yira chacham yamusu. We want to say what it means is that you're going to live forever, eternally, because you see, you visit wise people who have already died. So Rabbi Yaakov says, so if the Pasuk says that somebody who visits dead rabbis will live, so then certainly somebody who visits them when they're alive will live, and therefore Rabbi Yaakov justified why he would make the effort every day to reach his Rebbe, because there's something special about interacting with Talmidei Chacham that are alive. Rav Idi avod Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. So Rav Idi, who was the father of Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Abba Rogel Abba Ozil, Tlasa Yarchi B'Orcha V'Chad Yom B'Vei Rab. Friends, do you hear this? That Rav Idi, he lived a 3 months distance from the Beis HaMedrash. And basically between Pesach and Sukkot, it was just enough time that he could travel for 3 months, finally arrive at the Beis HaMedrash, stay for a day, and then make the trip back home so he could be home for Sukkot. Right? Meaning after Pesach he would make the trek, and it would be 6 months total, round trip, he'd be back for Sukkot. So again, Rav Idi avud Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi Abba Rogel Abba Ozil Tlas Yarchi B'Orcha. He would travel for 3 months. B'Chad Yom B'Vei Rab, and then he would spend 1 day at the Beis HaMedrash. Then he would have to turn away and go home for 3 months. V'Avukari Le Rabbanan, the rabbis would call him Bai Be'Rab D'Chad Yoma, a fellow who comes to the Beis HaMedrash for 1 day. It wasn't exactly a compliment. A fellow comes to the Beis HaMedrash for just 1 day. Chalash Daite. And Rav Idi felt bad. He said, is that really what they think about me? That I'm just a low level 1 day nick? So Rav Idi said about himself, it's like Eov says that that he's like a joke to his friends, to his colleagues. To Rabbi Yochanan says to Rav Idi, he says, excuse me, lo sainish lulu rabbanan, please, I bet, I'm asking you, Rav Idi, please do not punish the rabbis for belittling you. And then promptly Rabbi Yochanan went and he expanded in the Beis HaMedrash that the pasuk says that God says that they seek me out every single day. They desire to know my ways. So the Pasuk says, right, Yom Drijishun, that they seek me out every day. What? They only seek him out during the day, not at night? So Elolomalach, to say to you, that a fellow who studies Torah, even if it's just for 1 day in the year, the Pasuk treats it, right, as if he studied the entire year. Right? Therefore, Rav Idi coming to the Beis HaMedrash for 1 day is extremely significant. B'midas Puranos, and the same also works in the opposite for negative things. The Pasuk says, that by the Meraglim, the spies, when they went to Eretz Yisrael for 40 days, and they came back with a negative report. So God says, for the same number of days that you spied out and toured Eretz Yisrael, so then right, that's the number of years you're going to be wandering in the desert. Why are they being punished for 40 years? The Meraglim, the spies, were only there for 40 days. Rather to say to you, that a fellow who does an Avera, even if it's just 1 day in the year, we treat it as if he sinned the entire year. And therefore the 40 days of the Meraglim, each day was like in sin, and therefore each day was calculated as a year. So the 40 days that they were in Eretz Yisrael was sort of evaluated as 40 years that the Yidden paid the price and wandered in the desert. Friends, that was the Hey of Masechta Hagiga. It was basically mostly an accumulation of of Agadatas, a lot of them around this theme of a servant whose master is willing to do something that's pretty harsh. So then that servant really needs to be very careful. Anyways, that was Daf Hey, Masechta Chagiga. I think it was pretty interesting. Have a good day. Peace out.